Michael Mason, you were news editor at Gay News in the 1970s from 1972. Can you tell me before Gay News what the attitude of the mainstream press was in covering gay-related stories?
Well, they were a little selective about the stories they covered. What they used to cover was magistrates' court hearings. I mean, a gay story was about a teacher or a scoutmaster who got into trouble. I mean, there wasn't any other news really, unless there was a big government scandal. Even then, it tended to be some criminal offence. You know, when Ian Harvey got caught in St James's Park with the Guardsmen. That was it. It was crime. Liberace's libel scandal.
And before you joined Gay News as news editor, you were involved in the Gay Liberation Front. Do you tell us a few of your memories about the GLF?
Well, it was a complete shock for me. I was brought up to be a Tory and an establishment creature, and then the Gay Liberation Front happened with its revolutionary roots to do with feminism and Black Power movement in the States, and it completely changed my political outlook on life. It completely changed all my social relationships. Very quickly I was involved in Gay Liberation Front activities 7 nights a week, quite literally, in the theatre group or the manifesto group or the steering committee. Completely took over my whole life.
And did the GLF, did it partly lead to the formation of Gay News?
Yes, though I don't know how, because I didn't know about the formation of Gay News. It was something that went... Gay Liberation Front really only existed for about 18 months in its full flourishing state. And then it dissolved and fragmented and went different ways, and one of the fragments was Gay News. And I wasn't involved in those early talks about setting it up. But it came out of GLF.
Had you been involved in journalism yourself?
No, I hadn't. Though my father was on Fleet Street and was a publisher, later a publisher. So I knew about journalism, and I'd been to the Children's Press Club party. But no, I hadn't been involved in journalism. I was computers.
And you joined Gay News about 3 months after it had been launched. How did you get involved?
Well, I dropped out with GLF, and I was doing a paraffin round once a week and living on the dole, because this was the romantic hippie dropout thing to do. And I took about 6 months of it, climbed the wall. My partner realised that I couldn't take it anymore, and he spotted an ad in Gay News for business manager and said, "Why don't you apply for that? Because you clearly want to do something." And I thought, well, I can do that in my sleep, but if I get the job, what I wanted to do was to get onto the editorial side. So I applied for the business manager job, got it, even though there was opposition, because I came from a public school in Oxford, and that counted against me joining Gay News. So I got the business manager's job, and then 6 months later I was news editor. So.
And what were your memories of those early days?
Well, it was excitement. I mean, the idea of there being a gay newspaper was astonishing. It was the business manager side of it. I remember very little about it. It was to do with keeping it. It was bookkeeping and looking after subscriptions and things like that. But what was going on the editorial side was just fascinating. It was bringing people from all strange corners of the kingdom together.
I mean, you came from a private school background, an Oxbridge background. I mean, I know there were people there who'd never been to university.
Yeah.
It was a real melting pot. Sure. And did everybody get on?
Oh no. At one level, yes, because we were all part of a gang. You know, there was a bigger enemy outside, and you know, any state wants to have an outside enemy to coalesce its own citizens, and the same thing happened in the gay movement as well. Everybody was so passionate about this new revolutionary movement, as it felt, that everybody had strong beliefs, and they clashed. But there was an outside enemy, so
were you united by a common enemy then?
Yeah.
And your editor, well, one of the founders was Dennis Lemon.
Yeah.
What was he like to work with? What are your own memories and perceptions of him?
Dennis was driven and fierce, and what I wanted to do was to carve out the news section as a separate little principality, so that I could get on and do the news section without Dennis being too much involved. And so I worked very hard to prove that the news section could make a go of it, could produce something really rather good, so that Dennis wouldn't want to get involved, would be happy to let me get on with it, which he largely did.
So he gave you a lot of autonomy.
Well, there was an initial battle. When we started, we were following in the footsteps of the underground press, Friends IT. This was the great revolution of web offset printing, when suddenly the costs of entry into newspaper publishing fell hugely. Everybody started up. Gay News was part of that. And when we first came out, it was a slightly hippie-ish alternative press look to it, and my ambition as news editor was to have a news front page with headlines and a news report. Everybody loves news and passionate about news. You know, we have nightly news programs on TV that get huge audiences. That's what I wanted to concentrate on, was people's passion for news, and therefore I wanted the front page to be news, not features.
And while you were there, you must have covered quite a few news stories. What were the most challenging, do you remember?
The most challenging single most challenging news story was Jeremy Thorpe's trial, the scandal around Jeremy Thorpe. That was only challenging because we had a 7 or 8 day deadline. It was 7 or 8 days before what we wrote got out onto the streets in print. And of course, Fleet Street was coming up with news stories every day, so we were always behind. We didn't have a lot to say. They were saying what a nasty, perverted, kinky man he was, and we were saying, well, he's gay. And yet he's doing odd things, and there are strange guns and dogs and odd people in the background. We didn't know what to make of it. In news terms, how do you report the fact that it's a scandal, he's gay? Very difficult for a newspaper.
So you would have been going to news events. Obviously, when you were going to these events, it would have been the mainstream press as well. What was their relationship like?
Well, actually, the news we were covering were gay stories. And as I said, the mainstream press in those days was only interested in court cases. We were interested in groups forming within trades unions. We were interested in a group that wanted to get gay newspapers into their public library. Things that straight press didn't see as news, weren't covering. So we didn't have it. We went in competition with the straight press for news.
So was there any relationship with the mainstream press?
Well, slowly the GLF had become a story, and its aftermath, the idea of homosexuals demanding rights and that sort of thing, slowly became a story. And Fleet Street had no way into that story, because the gay movement didn't have a press office in the Strand. There wasn't anybody that the Fleet Street could phone up except Gay News. We were the public face. They thought, oh, the journalists, they'll know what's going on. So they used to phone us. It was extraordinary being at the centre of so much that was going on then.
And when you were there, do you think that Gay News had a big influence on government policy? when it came to civil rights?
No. The big change happened in the 50s and 60s with Wolfenden and law reform, and then nothing happened until Section 28. I can't remember when the first change happened as far as the age of consent was concerned. I mean, the age of 16 came in under Tony Blair, and I can't remember when 18 happened. But it was long after, really after the gay news time. So no, I don't think we had any effect on central government policy. We had a lot of effect on local government policy.
And you would have been there during two major periods. The first was the obscenity case about two men kissing on the front cover, which Gay News was cleared of, but there was the big Mary Whitehouse case involving the James Kirkwood poem. What are your memories of that?
It was unimportant and devastating. It was not an issue we wanted to stand on. It was a bad poem. And I didn't want it published because it was sentimental. I was not a believer, and it was aimed at sentimental believers, gay believers, saying, the church is for you too. I didn't believe that. So I was angry that we got involved in having to fight that.
Had there been arguments about publishing it with Dennis previously?
No, not really.
What was the atmosphere like then in the office?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. I was up in the typesetting room with Richard Norton. Had an old IBM electric typewriter composing machine. Dennis came in with this poem and said to Richter, "This will get the Christians going." Little did you know. That was the start of it. So that was the attitude. This will get the Christians going. And then it came out. There was a lot of fuss from our Christian readers who wrote to the letters page and said, "You should not be publishing something like this. It's deeply offensive." So it was an argument over that from both sides. And then nothing. Came out in June. We then heard in something like October or November, a little piece in the Evening Standard, Mary Whitehouse was going to prosecute, take out a private prosecution. So it was all that time we had no idea that there would be consequences.
Well, Dennis Lemon and Gay News were both found guilty.
Yeah.
And there were appeals, but the appeals failed, although his suspended sentence was quashed. How did it affect Gay News as a publication and as a business?
Well, it took a huge amount of our time. I remember travelling all around the country, talking to groups, and we were fundraising for legal costs. People wanted to talk to us because it was a matter of public controversy. Dennis was... It exhausted Dennis. He was so much in demand and had so many calls on his time. He didn't have time to sleep, let alone edit a newspaper. So it was a big drain on everybody. It was tiny little. I mean, there were 15 of us, something like that. And this thing lasted for 2 years.
Do you think it was the beginning of the end? Although, of course, it was a few years before Gay News folded. Do you think it led to
Finished
it?
Dennis.
Yes.
And Dennis was an important part of the energies of Gay News, of its driving force. So yes, I don't know too much about the ending. My friends were there, things were going badly wrong, and I didn't like to pry. I listened, I accepted what they said to me, but I didn't want to, I was on Capital Gain by that time, and I didn't want to get too involved.
What do you miss most about Gay News?
Oh, friends. But equally, I miss the excitement of people finding themselves in finding whole new different ways of living. Once people had said to themselves, "It's okay to be gay," they then started saying, "Well, why isn't my trades union defending me? why isn't my church defending me? Why can't I get a gay newspaper in my public library when I'm paying rates? All these different things started happening, and going around the country and seeing what people were up to was just enormous fun. Terribly exciting.
So you've talked about, perhaps it's part of its legacy, that it made people accept themselves more. It brought the community together. Any other greatest legacies?
It didn't. The gracious summing up of it all, and she often did this, sum up things. Alison Hennigan's remark that the Gay News was the debating chamber of the web. So we provided a platform. We were absolutely, perfectly, clearly, dictionary definition, a medium. We were letting people talk to one another for the first time. There'd never been an arena for gay people to talk to one another.
So you helped be that debating chamber?
No, we were that debating chamber.
You were a uniting force.
That was a functional thing. But we were... It's like going into a restaurant, you have wonderful food. We were knives and forks in the plates. You know, we were cutlery. But the food was coming from every corner of the country.
So that was one of its greatest achievements. What about its legacy? Would that play a role in it?
Legacy.
Is there a legacy?
It was a moment, it was a period in history. And history took its course. And there needed to be a gay news, something equivalent to that, to enable people to debate and to argue and to take things on. But whether you can call that gay news' legacy, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I suppose we happen to be the one that did that function.
And a couple more questions about gay news. Are there any particular memories that you'd like to share in particular?
Oh, every morning was an excitement. I mean, personally, I just had a lot of thrills out of it. I mean, interviewing Tony Wedgwood Benn. I think he was still Wedgwood Benn. Might have been Tony Benn by then. And to have a senior politician say, well, good on you, fight for your rights, that was quite shattering. Going to a Bette Davis press conference and asking her why she had so many gay fans and shaking her hand. You know, these are personal things that live vividly. Leading the Gay Pride Parade in San Francisco, the 10th anniversary Stonewall Pride Parade, my lover and I went there to cover it, and we were arrested by immigration. Such a fuss. Dianne Feinstein, then mayor, welcomed us at Grace Cathedral. We were invited to lead the Pride Parade.
Why were you stopped at immigration?
Because we were gay.
Really?
And in those days, it was illegal for homosexuals to enter the United States.
Gosh. So you've just talked about the animosity.
Yeah.
You met Bette Davis, you met quite a few people. Was there any homophobia from any of the maybe celebrities or politicians that you went to interview?
Yes, but not people tended not to voice it to you. They would voice it to other people. I mean, I have a memory of Ian Paisley and his Save Ulster from Sodomy campaign. And I phoned him up at the House of Commons and asked to be put through. And they said, Mr. Paisley is not available, leave your number, he'll phone you back. And I thought, yeah. And he did phone back. And I was absolutely shocked. And he was charming. I mean, he was quite outspokenly insistent on his belief that homosexuality is wicked, it's against the teachings of the Bible. But he was very cheerful and friendly and happy to talk about his beliefs and to accept that you differed. So I don't think many people had the courage to say what they thought to our faces, other than the odd one like Paisley. And that was done in a very friendly fashion. Strange.
You left Gay News, would it have been around 1981?
Yeah.
And you went on to set up Capital Gay. Now, obviously you weren't at Gay News when it folded, but do you have any perception of what went wrong? What led to it?
I heard so many different versions. I think Andrew and Gillian's book, and Gillian Hanscom and Andrew Lumsden's book, gave me what I wanted to know. And
Title
to
fight.
Be the title fight.
The Battle for Gay News.
But exactly the machinations that went on with Dennis Lemon and Robert Palmer, I really don't know about those. They were so opaque to me.
And why did you and your former colleague Graham McKerrow from Gay News set up Capital Gay?
I left Gay News to write a biography. My successor didn't work out, so I went back again, by which time Graham had joined as reporter. And we saw eye to eye on so much about the news, Gay News, and we had so many frustrations. And we used to go out at lunch, go out at lunchtime together and talk about, get them out of our systems. One of the things I've said earlier about this problem with the extended deadlines, about how it took 7 days to get something into print, that was hugely frustrating. We were very much London-based. We didn't have budgets to cover the country, and yet we purported to be a national newspaper. That was a frustration. And as we talked about these frustrations, we devised an ideal newspaper. It would be local. It would be it would be instant. It would be very quickly produced. We thought we weren't doing a good job. We thought that it should start up. We thought to begin with it would be ostensibly addressed to men, because we didn't have women involved. And one day one of us said to the other, and we don't know who, said, "This is getting serious, isn't it?" And we suddenly realised that we devised a new type of paper, and we wanted to do it.
So to what extent did it differ from Gay News?
It's already different.
How was it different?
Well, one thing that had happened is that clubs like Bang and Heaven had opened, and there was increasingly a stylish gay scene. There used to be backstreet discos, small amateur-run social events, but these Bang and Heaven were the big commercial guys moving in, and their influence spread around the country. And so suddenly, instead of people coming out of their teens and getting involved with political movements like CHE and GLF, which was the route that people used to travel.
Campaign for Homosexual Equality and Gay Liberation Front.
Instead of that, people were going straight from their nappies to the clubs. And so there wasn't any politicising going on of a lot of people. And yet, it seemed to us, there was an awful lot of news that the people out in the clubs ought to know about, that there was politics that actually affected them. And so we wanted to be a breezy tabloid. We wanted not to take ourselves seriously. We wanted to cover the scene. We wanted to do it quickly. We wanted it to be London-centred. We wanted it to be weekly. And so it was very different in those ways. We introduced completely new advertising, for instance. Pubs couldn't advertise in Gay News because they didn't know who their acts were going to be in time for Gay News' publishing deadlines, whereas we could take their ads 3 days before we were on the streets.
So you were getting the advertising. How difficult was it to set up at the beginning, the newspaper? Was it very challenging?
Well, we had a problem.
What was the problem?
The problem was that Dennis didn't want us. And so we had everything set up.
Dennis Lemon, the editor
of
Gay News.
And so the night before our first issue was due out, we phoned the distributors saying everything's on time, the paper will be with you tomorrow morning. They said, we should... I'm afraid Dennis has been in touch with us. He says that if we distribute you, we can't distribute Gay News. So obviously we can't distribute you. So we didn't have a distributor. So we went to the worst distributor who we'd been avoiding like the plague to say, help, can you distribute us? We then found that because of our publishing date, they weren't even taking us out of the warehouse 1 week in two. So that when we finally got return figures after 6 months, they showed us the warehouse, and it was just piles of unsold capital gaze.
So just wasted paper.
That never even left the warehouse.
Do you know why this was going on? Was there any homophobia involved, or was it just laziness?
It was the reason we didn't want to go to them in the first place. They just couldn't care about anything. I mean, Private Eye left them, and a whole load of publications left them and set up this new distributors who we wanted to go to, because they were doing such a rubbish job.
Terrible.
And so we actually told our friends we're out of business. And I finally told my father, we were packing it all in, he said, well, you can't give up like that. Have you thought of going free? Because we've been charging 10pence a week. We thought, oh God, do we want to go on? It's been such hard work. But we decided to go free. And it just took off.
And where was it available? Was it in gay bars? Or?
Instead of being distributed, we simply got some van drivers together and we just threw it out into every gay bar, every gay club, every gay bookshop that we knew of. And it was there every week and free.
You broke new ground. You were the first, arguably the first publication to mention HIV by name. We were one of the first free publications. You were one of the first free publications.
I don't mean free gay ones.
Yes.
I mean free newspapers. We were one of the first newspapers in the country that was A, free, and B, had editorial content rather than merely advertising.
And you also were the first to mention HIV. You had an HIV column.
We were second.
Second.
The first person to mention HIV in the gay press was Andrew Lumsden, who had 4 lines in Gay News about a new gay cancer that was being talked of in the States.
So Gay News broke that ground.
So Andrew Lumsden got...
But did he mention HIV by name?
It wasn't called HIV.
So you were the first to mention HIV by name?
Well, we were writing about HTLV3, I think, which is what it was called. Then Julian Meldrum, our columnist, who was so in advance of everybody, on top of everything, heard about the meeting where it was named HIV. The scientists had said, this is what it is, it's HIV. And Julian published this in his column, and if you look at the OED,
Oxford English Dictionary,
capital Gay is credited with being the first publication to use HIV, and the second was Nature.
Nature, wow, very different magazines.
And a lot more learned than Capital Gay, but nevertheless we were there first.
You also sponsored the Lesbian and Gay Switchboard as well. There was a huge incident in 1987. There was a firebomb attack on the offices of Gay News in London. What are your memories?
I'm very different from Graham on this, because I've heard Graham McKerrow talk about this and how it got through to him. My memories are, yes, a shock at the devastation, and it was filthy. The smell of anyone who's been in a fire will know that stench of smoke, and it's just horrible. It's so destroying, so soul destroying. But it happened at our Christmas issue, which always was the biggest issue of the year. It was a double issue. We took a break, so it advertised Christmas events and New Year events, and instead of being 24 pages, it was a 60-page issue. It was a huge issue. And what I remember is the staff for Capital Gay, there were about 6 of us, just giving everything to making sure that paper got out and got out on time. And I just remember it as being one of the most heroic episodes I've ever seen, the way people gave everything to sit in the middle of that wrecked fire hovel and put together the biggest issue of the year and get it out on time. It just fills me with tears and pride and everything. They were brilliant.
How did you first hear about the firebomb? Where were you?
I don't remember.
Was anybody caught? Was anybody arrested? Nobody at all. And wasn't there a senior Conservative, well, a Conservative MP?
Chris Smith, the Labour MP, who was a columnist of ours, had come down to the office, went to the House of Commons and said, I've just been to the offices of Capital Gay. They've been attacked, had been firebombed. And Elaine Kellett-Bowman muttered from the benches, a good thing. And she was challenged, and she said, I can't remember the exact words, but it was something that she approved the intolerance of evil.
And the evil being homosexuality.
Whether that or the newspaper or whatever, but yes.
And then she went on in that New Year's honours list to become a dame.
Yes, well, she was a personal friend of the Prime Minister's, so...
Do you think the government, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do you think the authorities at the time cared much about this firebombing?
No. I mean, it didn't matter to them at all.
Would that have been your toughest time with Capital
No.
Gay? What was your toughest time?
Getting bust.
And that happened in...
Well, it happened twice.
Twice?
Well, it happened after 6 months
Yes.
when we went distributed, and then it happened again later for real.
So when it happened for
me,
real,
it was a lot tougher.
What led to that? What happened?
Well, an editor of ours and his boyfriend decided that they could set up a paper to challenge Capital Gay, so they went off and did it. It only lasted 6 months because they didn't have a clue what they were doing. But a man called Kelvin Solis took it over. He came in to back them and then had them out of the door within 3 months. Just it was pretty ruthless stuff. And so he started off Pink Paper, which didn't do us any harm at all. But then he cleverly started up a thing called Boys, which was all pop and colour and pictures of rent boys in the back. And basically it was a pincer movement, so there was swap advertising at discount rates between Pink and Boys. And so essentially it was an attack on the advertising. And we were caught with... We couldn't do both. We were in no position to set up a rival Boys. So we stuck at it. And doing what we did best, I think, was being a newspaper. But the advertising went.
Do you have any regrets about Capital Gay? Is there anything else you would have done differently?
Well, I would foolishly ignore the sensible suggestion of David White and Jim Warboys, who were advertising, working in advertising then. They said we ought to start up a Manchester edition. And I think partly because I couldn't face the effort of doing a Capital Gay again, didn't want to hear that was a good idea and turned it down. That was foolish.
Gosh.
Because I think we could have done something. And the other thing was that I had an offer to buy the paper from a big publishing group for £250,000. And I went all GLF prissy saying, oh, well, the gay community has built Capital Gay, it's all been built on gay money, we can't betray that trust and sell it to a straight organisation. And of course, if we had, it would have run independently with gay staff, and it would have been a success, and it would be there today, and they would have dealt with our bad debts, and so that was a bad decision on my part too.
A couple more questions.
And I would have been quite rich as well, so everybody lost.
What do you miss most about Capital Gay?
Same as Gay News, the people. And being the news addiction, the drug of being at the centre and hearing everything first, or second. It's thrilling. It's a thrilling life. And we were good. Gay News and Capital Gay were both very good. There wasn't a lot of competition, but for what there was, we were good. So there's a lot of pride.
Do you think you've left a legacy?
There are still people who come up to me and say, I don't half miss capital gay. And this is ridiculous. This is, what's it, 15 years on, don't know, my maths.
About 18 now?
Yeah.
Mm.
So that's touching, but then most of the people who say that obviously are getting grey-haired. So, yeah, I have a sentimental memory of it. It did things for its time. It was certainly, I'm terribly proud of mainly Graham's contribution in the battle against HIV/AIDS, because we were so quick off the mark. It took the government 4 years to notice. It took the medical press a long time to notice HIV and AIDS. There were specialists in STD clinics who were reading Capital Gay as doctors for information that we were getting from the States instead of going to the Lancet. It's ridiculous, but that was the case. And if you look in France, where they didn't have a gay press who were pushing the crisis of HIV and AIDS, the rates of infection there in the gay community were double what they were in this country. And so I'm dead proud of that.
One more question. What has Michael Mason been doing since?
Well, he's spent 12 years involved in lesbian and gay immigration, the law firm in Waterloo, with the venerable Wesley Grigg, who was an absolute pioneer in lesbian and gay immigration, and has laid the groundwork for everything that's happened since. I was a secretary because nobody wanted to employ a 50-year-old out of work editor. So I worked there for 12 years. Then I left and joined in the family publishing firm, which fed me for a time. Now I'm retired and I'm hoping to move to Brighton soon.
Michael Mason, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
2 quick supplementary questions that Keith asked me to ask you. The first is, when you got involved with Gay News, did you have a dream? And if so, has that dream come true?
I had lots of dreams, and most of them have come true. It was extraordinary. Once I got involved, a lot of my dreams were about doing news. And I wanted everybody to know what was going on. And we did that. We did it quite well. My thing about my ambition was to have news on the front page. That was my big dream to begin with. And that happened. And yes, I mean, all sorts of things. I suppose my dream was that there should be equality, whatever that means. I was lucky. I mean, I've got this complete span of my life. I was born into a world where we were just criminals. And I'm now declining in retirement to an age where there's gay marriage. So that's one arc. The other arc was the technical side. I mean, we were born in an age where we just started the web offset that was bringing a whole new type of newspaper into life. And we went through a bit where the foreign stories used to take 10 days to reach us because there wasn't fax. And then came the internet. I'm very glad I'm not involved in internet journalism. But there's another arc that's going on in the background, and I'm quite excited about that arc too. But yeah, a lot of my dreams have come true. A lot of the people I knew then, I still know, and they are happy. That's the best.
Final question. You wrote quite a few of the editorials for Gay News, and you didn't get a byline. Now I know that.
Oh, I hated bylines.
But I know that truth, fairness, and justice is very important to you, as is objectivity. Obviously, when you're writing an editorial, some of that can go out of the window. How did you square being objective with the news and then writing an opinion piece?
I don't think my editorials were so classy as to get beyond banalities about fairness and equality and whatever. And I'm very much aware of what I wrote. I hope, reflected what everybody else's reaction. We all sat in a very small office and we talked and argued and whatever. And what went into the editorials largely came out of those discussions and the general feelings. I think the only time I ever went entirely personal was my partner was called Carl Hill, and there is one editorial where the first letter of each paragraph spells Carlhill, and I think that was the most personal I ever got. That was our anniversary.
Thank you.